Hello. Hello. Nice, I like that. I like doing stuff like that, sort of messing around with the things you're supposed to do when you speak to people. It's fun. I was on a train, from London to Cornwall recently, and it was a bank holiday train in the summer at the weekend. So that basically means it's going to be an immensely busy train. But the weird thing about this day was that just before my train, the train previous to mine had been cancelled. So that meant that train had crossed the line from being a busy train to being basically a mechanized manifestation of pure evil. So I was basically, I didn't have a seat, obviously, and I was stuck in the corner, but there's a bit between the carriages, and I was stuck in like one edge of that, like wedged in between the toilet door and the wall, like this. And the funny thing is, the situation was bad, but it was made like way worse by the fact that everyone else was moaning about it. So we're all in the same situation, but everyone is like vocally moaning, which makes your situation worse. So I got really pissed off with these people for moaning. But then I was like, hang on a minute, I can't moan as well, because if I'm moaning as well at them, then I'm being like them as well. So I thought, right, I'm going to rise above the situation. I'm going to rise above this. I thought, I'm determined to have, a good time here. So what do I need to have a good time? Alcohol. Problem is, I can't move because I'm wedged into the corner of the thing next to the toilet. And also, even if I could move, the train was so busy that there were people like standing all the way down the aisles for 3 carriages, all the way down to the buffet car. So there's no way I could have gone to get a beer. But I thought, no, I've got nothing to lose, and I had £2 in my pocket. So I said to the guy next to me, do you reckon if I pass this to you, and you pass the £2 to the next person, and we got that £2 passed all the way along the 3 carriages to the buffet car, do you reckon a beer would return? He said, you'll be lucky. Oh, yeah. But I thought, no, I believe in the power of the universe to do. If you put it out there, it'll come back. So I thought, I gave him the £2. I said, pass it on. He laughed. And then he turned to the person next to him, and he explained it. And they were like, what? And then he explained it again. They laughed. And then they passed the money on, and the next person laughed. And then off it went. It went through the doors, and it disappeared out on its unexpected voyage out to the buffet car. And that's the last time I ever saw that £2. Right, let's talk about rap music, obviously. So, rap music. Rap music and hip-hop culture from whence it sprung was born in the 1970s. This is actually the 40th anniversary of the creation of hip-hop culture and rap music, where it came from. Other way around. Rap music and hip-hop culture, where it came from. It's 40th anniversary. So it's really interesting that a cultural movement that's now a global industry has an origin story, and you can pin it down to a specific year and a specific place. Now, that place was the South Bronx. Now, I found the perfect picture online to illustrate just how shitty the South Bronx was at the time. The problem is, the photographer I found, I emailed him and said, can I use your picture? And relating to the stuff Chris was talking about earlier about copyright, he said it's going to cost me $150 to use the picture for this slideshow. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but it's not worth 150 quid for 10 seconds. So instead, I'm going to describe the picture to you. In the background, we've got three massive tenement buildings with the roof that's just missing. And in the right-hand side of the closest one, the top 3 floors, the front facade and the side wall are all completely removed. It's like a bomb has hit the building. In the foreground, there's just loads of rubble lying around. And right in the foreground, there's I love the way I keep looking at it as if it's there, which is great. In the foreground, there's an armchair. And next to the armchair, there's a pushchair, and there's a little boy sat in the armchair. And on the arm of the armchair, there's a woman sat looking forlornly into the distance. And she looks middle-aged, but I'm guessing she's probably a lot younger than that. But what I find really interesting when you think about this thing that's now a multi-billion-dollar global industry, at the time, like the people who created it, the seeds of this thing, if you live life in those conditions, I'm only guessing this because I'm not from there, obviously, I wasn't there at the time, but there's no way that you're doing anything you're doing for any reason other than the fact that it's what you have. Like, you're not doing something thinking anyone's ever going to value this, because until now, no one's ever shown any signs of valuing you at all. But it was against that backdrop that there was the seeds of all these wonderful cultural things kind of sprang up as people were they turned their back on gang culture and instead started building parties in the public, and they would get big speaker systems out, and they would get like lines of extension cables out from the speakers and plug it into a street light, and then basically power the turntables and speaker system from a street light and get people to come out and dance. And it was this place that basically seeded so much really creative stuff, like the birth of rapping, the birth of breakdancing, the birth of graffiti art, and also the birth of the stuff that Chris was doing with the music earlier, that taking and reappropriating other people's music to make it your own, that all seeded in this one place and time and makes it really special. Now, the great thing is that it's sort of so uniquely born of the place it was from, but it managed to make it out of the Bronx. And hip-hop made it right across the world. It made it to Iran, where people like rapping about their government. It made it all the way past disco. And it made it to the most unlikely places, like Cornwall. And the village of Stenalees. Now, if you try to think of a place that's any more unlike the Bronx than anything, it's Stenalees. Basically, this is just before I fell in love with hip-hop. What fascinates me about it, I mean, there's a guy called Rakim who's like the greatest MC of all time, in my humble opinion. And Rakim said, basically, he came up with the immortal line, "It ain't where you're from, it's where you're at," as in where you're at mentally. But if you can tell from this picture that I am both very much from and at Stenalees. As you can tell from the shell suit trousers. But what I love about it, it's like, I absolutely fell in love with this music. I guess it's something in it that came from its original seed that spoke to me for whatever reason. And I love the fact that there's absolutely nothing in those people who created it in the first place that would ever have dreamt that it would ever have planted like these lovely little seeds of joy in the mind of someone in a village in like China clay mining country in Cornwall. It just doesn't make any sense, but it did. And it wasn't even an affectation. It was a pure, like absolute obsessive love with this thing. It was a love of lyrics, a love of beats, a love of all the relationships between rappers. Like you get to learn who produced who and who released what. It's a bonding device between me and my friends, a window to the world. It was so much stuff. And it was a love of lyrics from people like Tribe Called Quest or Rakim, Cool G Rap, Public Enemy, all these great groups that even now I'm walking around in my mid-30s and I've got lyrics from these guys playing around inside my head. And I honestly think that the reason it connects in that way is because it was born in its original sense. It doesn't matter where the kind of social economic situation is. If it's born of that seed of love, then when someone is looking for that same love somewhere else, they'll find it in it and they'll find their own meaning in it. So it's been great. It's been like a life partner for me in a way, like hip-hop. And I'm never going to have something like that again. I'm not going to be 50 and suddenly get that much into like Renaissance art or something. It's not going to happen. But this is carrying on. It's wonderful. But it was only the other day that I realized that in the midst of all this, like even though I had a love for it the whole time, I think I'd actually missed the true meaning of what hip-hop should have been telling me the whole time. Because you don't get any greater DIY culture than a thing that all you need is your mate to bang out a beat on a table and you just start opening your mouth and saying stuff. Like, that's the most DIY thing in the world. And what it says is that anyone can do this. Anyone can do anything they, if you believe it, do it. Just get out there and do stuff. But I, whilst focused on a culture from halfway around the world, I kind of missed what I could have been doing at home. So I wasn't doing it, I was just observing it and consuming it. Meanwhile, I could have been out surfing or something, but I wasn't. I was at home reading mail order lists, trying to get albums and stuff, which is cool. But I thought about my life through this filter the other day. It may seem trivial, that idea, like it's you as a kid, what does it matter? But then I filtered my whole life through that same idea. I was like, have I just observed the whole time and not done anything? And I realized I grew up in that village. I don't know where to point. I'm looking here. It's confusing. I grew up in that village, at the top end of that village for half my life. So 20 years in that village, 10 years at the top of it, which is basically like living at the ass end of a little village at the ass end of the country. And you're looking halfway around the world for your frameworks of cultural reference points and things to do. But when I finally got out of that area, I went to university. What did I study at university? I studied history, which is effectively the study of things that dead people have long ago stopped doing. So essentially, there's nothing to get involved with there either. So I ended up, after my degree, I was back at home in Cornwall stacking shelves in Asda. And I was thinking, I don't know what I do. And I'm a bit lost. So I packed up and moved to Japan for 2 years. Now, in Japan, you can't do anything because you've got no fucking idea what's going on. So I ended up moving back, and after 2 years, I moved back and moved to London. Before I moved to London, I was in Cornwall, literally. It was one Christmas, and I found myself throwing stones into the sea, crying. And I was like, I was 25. And I was like, dude, you need to sort yourself out. Like, you need to get and do something. So what did I do? I moved to London and I trained as a journalist, which is great. I now have a career writing about what other people do. Which is fine. It's a totally valid thing, but I mean, not everyone's born to be a doer. But the thing is, I know that I've got a voice that's always been there in my head saying, oh, I could do this. And I get really excited about things, and I often start them, but I never finish them. And I realize the reason that is because that positive voice is immediately followed by another voice that goes, yeah, but you're a bellend. So I like to think if I had actually heeded the message that hip-hop tried to tell me all that time, that I could have saved myself 20 years of abortive projects that I only didn't do because I was just too busy calling myself a bellend. Bellend. Yeah. But luckily the story doesn't end there. And a few years ago, I found myself in another of these periods where I was like, man, I really don't know what I do. So I found myself going to improvisation, like improvised comedy classes, run by a guy called Steve Rowe, who runs workshops under the name of Hoopla in London. Now, Steve, the message of improv, the way that it teaches you, the main thing it teaches you is to overcome that bellend voice. And what it does is it tells you that everything you do or you bring to the table, no matter how small it is, someone will pick it up. As long as you mean it and you commit to that idea, someone else you're working with will pick that idea up and it will become something. It may not become the thing you intended it to be, but it will become something. For me, in my case, often it was from very ropey shows, but that wasn't the point. It was like, you start to develop this thing. It's not even a theory, it's a physical sensation. You can find yourself on the side of a stage in a show, and you're watching people on stage having fun, and your body is like, as in, let's go, let's get involved. But you don't move because you're too busy calling yourself a bellend. But in time with the improv training, you actually overcome that feeling. And it leads to some wonderful things. Not least, one day I was on the way back from an improvisation workshop, and I met this guy called Rob. Now, Rob was born in Tasmania, which is essentially the Australia's equivalent of Cornwall in terms of how it relates to the Bronx. And Rob had grown up with a similar lifetime of loving hip-hop music. So with this improv training in us, we had this idea. We were like, oh man, we have to do that now, don't we? Like, yeah, okay. So me and him got together and we made a hip-hop night. Despite being the two least testosterone-fueled men to have ever collaborated on anything. And we did. We set up a hip-hop night, and 5 people came out to watch it, and we had a microphone lead that was only this long. So we had to do our rapping, like leaning on the bar. But, 18 months on, we're still going. We're not Eminem, but we're still going, and now our mic cable is at least 10 meters long. So, but yeah, tons of really good stuff has come from it. Rob also joined me and my mate Scott going down to Cornwall, and we took a hip-hop gig down to a village called Sticker in their village hall. And there's an annual pasty-making competition, and afterwards, we led the audience in a spontaneous recreation of the Middle Eastern conflict, dressed as wizards. I might tweet Scott's hat later, as I've got a picture of his hat, which I might tweet. So yeah, why did we do that, though? Why? It doesn't make any sense, but it did make sense to us and everyone else who was there at the time. So, we're starting to do things just because we fancy putting our £2 out there and seeing what would come. Now this... Hello. That's all right. Hello. Whew, got this one now. So this music's made by a band called Unexpected Guests, which was formed purely as a basis of Rob, of us having our chat. He pulled a band together, and they wound up supporting Public Enemy, which is one of my childhood heroes. And I actually realised that would never have happened. Like Chuck D ended up tweeting, the guy from Public Enemy tweeted how good it was, and that would never have happened if me and Rob had never put our £2 out there just to see what would happen next. Right, that's it really, but I've got this mic in my hand and this song's really short, so I should start doing something. I should start saying something. Doesn't even matter if it doesn't mean nothing. I'm not bluffing. It's
words is gonna start to speak. That's right, I grab the microphone and start to freak. Yeah, that's right, yeah. You know what you got? You got a weird Cornish dude rapping on a red dot. Yeah, that's right. But I'm not limited, yeah. I'm the dude that can do the things, and whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. I've been told not to leave the stage, so instead I'll come back and get in a rage. Yeah, I'm angry, yeah, I can do that shit. I can grab my dick and shit. It's all that hip-hop shit. No, it doesn't work if you're from Cornwall. I've got no rhymes at all. Doesn't matter, just do it anyway. Just step over the edge. That's right, it's like Rakim said, know the ledge. That's right, put knowledge together, split it up and say something else, and that's totally what's up with hip-hop. Oh, that ended. Ah, cool, thank you.
So I'd just like to say, to end, as is quite abundantly clear, I still haven't got a clue what's going on. But thinking about it, I guess I'd much rather not be the guy who's holding out for his $150 that, to be quite frank, he's never going to get. I'd rather be the dude who puts his £2 out there, even though I have no idea whether anything's going to come back. Thank you.